is our 57 Chevy 3100 pickup truck. It's got a 235 inline six. The previous owners had it sitting for about 12 years, I think. So when we got it, it wasn't running and it hadn't been running that long. So it needed a lot of work. We've had it for 2 weeks and we've done a lot to it, just getting it to where it'll start up and it'll somewhat drive down the road like just a classic old car. So the paint, from what I understand, is all original. The rust really isn't too bad. We'll just kind of give an overview of the outside. They always rust in the corners, and this one has it too. It's not that bad. And then the steps themselves are only this side's rusted. Other than that, it's got dents and dings, but overall the body is really not bad. You've got your usual spots, but we'll give a quick overview of what I've done to it to get it where it is. As far as the ignition system, I put a new coil in it, and I did away with the points and condenser inside the cap. There's a module for Pertronics that does away with all of that. It's literally a screw, and then you connect it to the positive and negative terminals of your coil. It does away with the hard starting, cold starts. It just runs a lot better. It's a little over $100, but it's well worth it. Put a new fuel pump on it as well. Fuel filter, had to clean out all the fuel lines. They were pretty full and crusty. Had a carburetor rebuilt for it before I got the truck. I had purchased another motor just for really cheap and it had a carburetor on it. So I went ahead and had that rebuilt, so I had it ready to go on. And I realized pretty quickly that I needed to put a fuel pressure regulator on it. I just have an analog one. I got it off Amazon for I think $24. It was sending too much fuel and it was just flooding out the carburetor. It's a bigger fuel pump than the stock one, but it bolts right in. I didn't realize that, and it just kept throwing fuel everywhere. I'll put a video of that. So I put a fuel regulator on it and it seems to be working fine. Also changed the radiator. The old one, after running it for a few minutes, it started leaking really bad. So I got a new one. It's aluminum. It was probably the most budget one I could find. It was under it was under $200. So far it seems to be working fine. I put a aftermarket, just a little cheap Bosch temperature gauge in it in the original location. And I just wired that inside. I think I have it zip tied up right now. So that's kind of the engine bay. What we did to get it running. New battery, cleaned up the posts. I just put new ends on the leads there. Then moving in, the inside needs some work. We're gonna do a deep clean on it right now. Thankfully the floor is not that rusty. You can see even in the corners and stuff where normally it's all rusted through. It's not bad at all. So when we got it, it had the manual 3 on the tree, and the transmission itself worked, but the linkage was really worn out. And I was able to drive it down the road once with the linkage it had, and I was able to get it through the gears, but it wouldn't go back down. I couldn't get it out of gear. I couldn't find neutral. I messed with the linkages a bit, just to no avail. But that spare motor that I bought, it came with this transmission. It's a SM420. It's a 3-speed with a granny first gear, and that granny first gear is really, really low. I have a SM465 in my other pickup truck, and I thought that was low, but this is geared really low. So that's what I did the other day. I had to get a lengthened drive shaft. So it's got a new drive shaft in it because the tail shaft on the Saginaw 3-speed was so much longer. I had to lengthen the drive shaft. So that's brand new. The cover plate here, I have it, and I was planning on just cutting a hole in it for this, but they make one for pretty cheap that just bolts right in. So I went ahead and ordered one of those. I've got my accelerator pedal kind of rigged up there. That was all. The linkage was rusted out, so I just got an old door hinge actually and made that work. This is where I've got my aftermarket temperature gauge. The volts is not, they're not hooked up right now, but I've just got this in there temporarily. As far as the gauges, they do work. The oil gauge seems to work as well as the volts. The gas gauge also, and the gas gauge, it took a bit to get that working. The previous owners had bought and installed a brand new gas tank, but that was about 10 or 12 years ago. So it needed to be cleaned. So I cleaned that out with vinegar and some rocks, and that did it really well. And then I went ahead and got a new sending unit from LMC. And so that hooked up to the original wiring, which was there. And so far the fuel gauge seems to be working. So I got some 205 70s off of Marketplace. I was on a really tight budget, and I was gonna get some new ones, but then I saw these on Marketplace. They're smaller than the ones that were on it, which were 235 75 15. So they're a little smaller, but they were brand new. The guy bought them last year and never put them on, and I got them for really cheap. I kind of like the way they look. I might end up going with some white walls or some 235s, but that's what I'm working with now. As far as the brakes, the previous owners had got the brakes completely redone, from master cylinder to all of the drums and shoes. So when I got it though, there was nothing. The pedal just went to the floor. So I assumed worst case, and it was all after sitting for 10 or 12 years. It was shot, but I popped open the master cylinder, which is underneath the driver's floorboard, and it was bone dry. So I just filled it up and pumped it for about 5 minutes, and they started coming back to life. And so far they've been okay. I haven't done much of a road test in this. I've driven it maybe a quarter mile up the road that way and maybe a half a mile down the road that way. Just today, the first time with the new transmission. So far the brakes seem okay. So the plan as of right now is to get it mechanically sound, where it'll start up, run down the road, stop, and get the lights working. Get the interior a little bit nicer, just sound deadening, and then new rubber mats that cover the floor. And that's pretty much where I want to get it. If I can get it running and driving down the road, lights work, and the interior a little better, that'll be great. That in doing the interior, I'm kind of thinking doing the molding too and the weather stripping. It's really worn and there's not much left, just the lining. All the glass is intact, which is awesome, but the windows really need new weather stripping. The doors too. The doors, they've got some, and it's not the worst, but I think that would go a long way. It's an old truck, it's rusty, it's got dents, but if it's something that you can get in, it's a little bit quieter, there's sound deadening, the floor looks decent, and the windows all roll up smoothly and seal, and then you've got headlights, brake lights, turn signals. I think that's a really good starting point to see where we want to go from there, whether keep it, flip it. I've thought about making it four-wheel drive and putting solid axle under the front since it's already got leaf springs, but we'll see from there. But from where we've gotten it from about 2 weeks ago, I'm really happy with the progress. There's a bunch of little things that are missing or need to be touched up. It's missing the spring for this hinge, and then the door needs to be reattached there. It's kind of hanging loose, so when you open it, it catches right there. So those are on my list of immediate things to fix. I just want to show you really quickly the gearing. I have a 465 in my 79 K15, and that has a really low first gear. And so I thought this would be similar to SM20, really similar transmission. The first gear on this is ridiculous. So that's the first gear. And that's just idling. It is a really slow first gear. You can see, since I don't have the transmission cover, how slow we're going here. It's just idling along. It's pretty cool. Yeah, you can see the gauges work. Oil moves a little slowly and it's not really high, but I'm gonna look into that and see if a new sending unit helps, or I think I might drop the oil pan and make sure that the screen on the oil pump is not clogged up or anything. But for sitting for about 12 years, doesn't run real bad.